The Queen's command. The crowd inside the arena screamed with joy. The air was hot, filled with the smell of metal and dust. On the stage below, bright lights shined down on a man, tall, rough, and human. His name was Ryland Kane. His hands were tied in thick chains. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead, but he stood straight. He didn't shake. He didn't cry. Around him, thousands of alien eyes watched from high seats. The Zorthan Empire loved these kinds of shows. Public punishments, big fights, screams, pain. Today, the Queen had something special for them. From her tall, golden throne, Queen Kira of Zorthan gave a cold smile. Her crown glowed with rare crystals. She was beautiful, powerful, and full of hate for humans. She turned to her top warrior, a tall female fighter in silver armor. Her name was General Sylari, the Queen's chosen blade. She had never lost a fight. Humiliate him, Queen Kira whispered. Break his pride. Show the galaxy what happens when humans talk back to a queen. Sylari nodded once, then stepped onto the arena floor. Ryland looked up at her. His eyes were calm. He didn't look scared. He didn't kneel. Instead, he gave a slow, crooked smile. Nice armor, he said. The crowd fell quiet. Did the human just mock her? Sylari raised her sword. It hummed with deadly energy. You'll regret that, human. Ryland tilted his head. Maybe, but I doubt it. A bell rang. The match had begun. Ryland moved quickly, surprising many. Even in chains, he ducked and rolled away from the first strike. Her blade smashed into the ground, cracking stone. Dust flew everywhere. He used it. Vanishing into the cloud, he circled, her like a wolf. The crowd screamed again, some for him, most for blood. She spun around and kicked. Ryland flew backward, landing hard. The crowd laughed, but he got up again, slowly, calmly. You're strong, he said, rubbing his shoulder. But you telegraph your moves. What? Sylari snapped. You're too clean, he said. Too royal. You fight for pride. I fight for survival. She screamed and ran at him. This time he didn't move. He stood still until the last second, then dropped flat, sweeping her legs. She hit the ground hard, stunned. Silence. Then, a whisper. Did he just knock her down? Sylari jumped to her feet, her pride burning. She came at him fast and wild, no more control. Just rage. Ryland took hits. He had no weapon, but he never stayed down. Each time he rose again. Bleeding, tired, but smiling. The smile got to her. You think this is funny? She shouted. No, he said, dodging another attack. But, watching the crowd realize you're not invincible? That's priceless. She growled and tried to end it. One final hit. She swung with full strength, but Ryland stepped inside her guard. With perfect timing, he caught her wrist, twisted her arm, and swept her legs again. This time she didn't fall alone. He pinned her to the ground, his chains pressed into her throat, but he didn't squeeze. The whole arena was quiet. Ryland leaned down and said in a soft voice only she could hear, I could kill you, but I won't, because I'm not your monster. Then he let go. He stood, back straight, breathing hard. He walked away from her body and faced the Queen. I didn't come to beg, he said loudly. I came to show you what humans are made. Up in her throne, Queen Kira stood in shock. Her face was twisted with anger. No, she shouted. He cheated. This match is not valid. But the crowd didn't listen. They had seen the truth. The human had won. Down on the floor, Sylari sat up. She looked at her hands, then at him. Her mind was spinning. No one had ever defeated her, and yet he spared her life. Why? The Queen's voice rang out again. This human will be punished for this. Guards! But no one moved. For the first time, the Queen's orders were met with silence. Something had changed in the arena that day. Not just the outcome of a fight, but the beginning of something the Queen had never expected. Respect for a human. And deep inside Sylari's heart, buried under her anger and shame, something strange began to grow. Curiosity. The warrior falls. The whispers in the arena didn't stop, not even hours after the match had ended. Guards stood frozen at their posts, unsure whether to obey the queen or protect themselves. The royal warrior, General Sailari, had been defeated by a human. A chained human, and he hadn't killed her. That part bothered everyone most. If he had crushed her, they could explain it away. But instead, he had offered mercy. That shook the foundations of Zorthan pride. Inside the palace walls, Sailari sat alone in her chamber, still wearing her dented armor. Her sword leaned against the wall untouched. Her hands were trembling, though she didn't understand why. No one had ever made her bleed in a match. No one had ever outsmarted her like that, and no one, especially no human, had ever let her go. She remembered Ryland's eyes, steady and calm even while bleeding. There was no hate in them, no fear, just understanding, as if he knew something she didn't. Sailari stood quickly and paced the floor, furious with herself. She had studied war since childhood. She trained until her muscles burned. She had conquered planets. And now, because of one human's smug smile and clever moves, she was the object of laughter and whispers behind the queen's back. But it wasn't just shame. That wasn't the full truth, and she hated that truth more. She had enjoyed the fight. In the royal chamber, Queen Kira was not sitting quietly. Her fury echoed through the golden halls. She smashed a crystal cup to the ground, sending shards flying. I gave her one command, she hissed. Break the human. Humiliate him. Instead, she fell. The Zorthan council stood in uneasy silence. They were old, wise, and careful with their words, but even they couldn't deny what they had seen. By their own ancient laws, a warrior who loses a public match must perform a ritual of honor. And in this case, the law was clear. If a warrior of Zorthan loses to someone from a lower species, they must either be exiled, executed, or bonded in honor to their opponent. The queen slammed her fists down. You dare suggest that Sailari, my best warrior, should marry a human? Are you mad? An elder spoke calmly. We did not make the law. We only remember it. Back in the holding cells, Ryland sat in silence. His wounds had been cleaned, but his hands were still bound. The guards didn't know what to do with him now. He wasn't just a prisoner anymore, he was something more. A symbol. He stared at the ceiling, his mind focused. He had not come to this planet to fight. He had come to negotiate peace after Zorthan. Raids killed civilians in 3 human colonies. But when the queen laughed at the peace offer and threw him into the arena, he realized words would not win respect here. Strength would. And now, he had it. He heard footsteps echoing down the stone hall. A door slid open. He didn't move. General Sailari stepped in. She was wearing ceremonial robes now, no armor, no weapons. Her face was unreadable. You embarrassed me in front of my people, she said softly. You tried to kill me, Ryland answered without looking at her. Silence. Then she said the last thing he expected. I have been ordered to bond with you. He turned his head slowly. Bond. Our people have laws, ancient ones. If we lose a fight in public, we must submit, or die in shame. He stood up. So what are you choosing? She stepped closer, her voice steady. I choose to live. 3 suns later, across the city of Valakra, millions gathered for a royal bonding ceremony. Some came to cheer, others came to stare in disbelief. Never in Zorthan history had a human stood beside one of their war-blooded champions as an equal. Ryland wore simple clothes, unbothered by the stares. He stood proud. Sailari walked beside him like a statue carved from steel. Her face gave nothing away. The queen sat on her throne, eyes burning with quiet rage. She couldn't stop the ceremony without breaking tradition, and if she did, her people would turn on her. The High Elder began the ritual. 2 warriors, 2 souls, 1 bond, not of love, but of honor. The words rang through the air like thunder. The moment their palms touched, ancient lights glowed from the stone floor. Rylan didn't flinch. Silari's hand hesitated, just for a second, but then it closed over his. Gasps echoed from the crowd. The bond was sealed. That night, behind closed palace doors, Silari stood near a window, staring at the moons. Rylan sat in silence, reading an old Zorthan scroll. "You think this means anything?" she asked. He looked up. "To me? No, it's just tradition." "Then why did you agree?" "Because now no one can silence me. No one can erase what happened. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to change everything." She turned slowly to face him. "You think one man can do that?" Rylan stood walking past her. "Not one man," he said. "But two warriors. Maybe." As he opened the door to leave, he paused. "You may hate me now, Silari, but one day you'll understand why I spared you." And with that he was gone. She stood alone. Her hand still tingled where his had touched it. And her heart, long frozen, felt something new. Not defeat, not shame, but the beginning of something dangerous. Curiosity. The punishment. The palace halls were cold, quiet, and full of whispers. Everyone had seen it, the bond ceremony between General Silari and the human Rylan Kane. It was meant to be a punishment, a humiliation, a legal requirement to save the general's honor after her defeat. But instead of shame, something far more dangerous had been born that day. Curiosity, respect, unity. And the queen hated all of it. Queen Kira sat alone in the star chamber, the glass dome above her showing swirling blue galaxies. Her fingers tapped slowly on the arm of her throne. Her jaw clenched. She had ruled for decades, unchallenged, feared by every species that crossed her. But now, because of a human, one human, cracks had started to form in her empire. She had planned everything perfectly. Throw the human into the arena, let Silari humiliate him, make an example for the galaxy. But Rylan had stolen that moment. He had turned her prized warrior into a living symbol of failure. Worse, he didn't even seem to care about power or revenge. That made him unpredictable, and unpredictable men were dangerous. "You should have killed him," she muttered to herself. She had tried to undo the bond, but the council reminded her that breaking ancient law would make her look weak. Already, murmurs spread across colonies that Queen Kira was losing control. That night, she made a decision. If the law protected the human, she would find another way. In their newly assigned quarters, Rylan stood by the training wall, sweat on his forehead, hands wrapped in cloth. He threw punches at a heavy target block, fast, clean, without anger. Across the room, Silari watched him from the shadows. She said nothing, her arms crossed. "You could join me, you know," Rylan said between strikes. "I don't train with enemies," she replied flatly. Rylan stopped and faced her. "Then why are you still watching?" Silari's eyes narrowed, but she didn't answer. The truth was she couldn't stop thinking about that moment in the arena, when he had every chance to kill her but didn't. Instead, he had chosen something worse for her pride. Mercy. He spoke again. "I know this bonding wasn't your choice, but I'm not here to make your life harder. I came to stop your queen from burning more colonies." Silari looked away. "You think she'll listen to you now? She hates you more than ever." "I'm not here to make friends," he said. "I'm here because your people need to see another way." Her voice grew sharper. "And what? You think you're the way?" "No," Rylan said simply. "But we might be." That night, Silari was summoned by the queen herself. The royal guards led her through silent, torchlit halls. The queen waited inside the mirror room, where crystal panels reflected every angle of the person standing at its center. The room was meant to reveal truth. But tonight, It only reflected manipulation. The Queen's voice was sweet, but cold. "You've disappointed me, Sailari." Sailari stood still, proud. "I followed the law. I kept my honor." "Honor?" The Queen laughed bitterly. "You bonded with an insect. You let him defeat you. And now he walks freely, planting ideas into my people's heads." Sailari said nothing. The Queen stepped forward. "I offer you a chance to fix this." "I won't kill him," Sailari said without waiting to hear the rest. "No," the Queen said smoothly. "That would be too obvious, but humiliation, real humiliation, can still be yours. Break his mind. Make him beg. Make him doubt his victory." Sailari looked directly at the Queen. "And if I refuse?" The Queen's smile vanished. "Then I will break both of you." The next day, things changed. Guards began treating Rylan with silence. Not hate, just distance. His messages to Earth were suddenly blocked. Every meeting he requested with council elders was delayed. And Sailari? She became colder. She didn't join him at meals. She didn't train with him. She answered his words with nods or silence. It was like she had shut herself inside a shell again. Rylan noticed. Of course he noticed. One night, as they sat alone in their quiet chamber, Rylan finally spoke. "Did the Queen get to you?" Sailari turned to him, her face blank. "You think too highly of yourself." "No," he said. "I just recognize a person pretending not to care." She stood. "You are not Zorthan. You don't understand our way." "Then teach me," Rylan said softly. Her fists clenched. "I was born to fight, born to obey. I was raised to believe that humans were weak, dirty, loud creatures. I was taught that only power matters." He stepped closer. "And now you see a different truth." "That doesn't make it easier," she whispered. "No," he replied, "but it makes it real." Later that night, Sailari stood in the training chamber alone. She faced the same strike post Rylan had used earlier. She raised her fists and hit it, again and again, not out of anger, but confusion. The punishment wasn't the bond. The punishment wasn't the Queen's rage or the whispers in the streets. The real punishment was feeling something she was never supposed to feel. Respect for the human. And worse, hope. The bond begins. The morning sky over Valakra glowed, with pale silver clouds swirling gently across the horizon like brushstrokes on glass. It should have been a peaceful day, but inside the palace, both Rylan Kane and General Sailari felt anything but peace. Something had shifted between them, not with loud words, but with silence. Every glance held a question. Every breath shared in the same room felt heavier. The bond that was supposed to be a punishment was beginning to grow roots. Rylan noticed it first in small ways, the way Sailari paused before leaving the room as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. The way her footsteps slowed when they passed training cadets whispering about the human warrior. She no longer snapped at him. She no longer looked at him like an enemy. But she didn't yet look at him like an ally either. She was torn, and he could feel it. That afternoon, the Queen sent them on a diplomatic mission together. A request, not a command, though both knew it was another test. A message had arrived from the distant outer colony of Baron Thule. There had been unrest among the Zorthan workers, whispers of rebellion. The Queen hoped the sight of her general, standing tall beside her human pet, would quiet the noise. The journey took hours in a small royal cruiser. Rylan and Sailari sat across from one another, silent at first. Stars streaked past the window as the ship entered slipstream. Neither spoke, until Rylan finally broke the silence. "Why did you agree to this mission?" Sailari looked at him. Her armor caught the light, but her eyes looked tired. "Because if I refuse, she'll call me a coward. If I go, she'll use me as a symbol of obedience. And yet you're still here," Rylan said. She stared out the window. "I don't know who I am anymore." He didn't answer. There was no need. He understood that feeling all too well. When they arrived on Baron Thule, the crowd was tense. Alien miners, traders, soldiers, and civilians stood together, arms crossed, unsure whether to bow or raise their weapons. Then they saw Sailari. Then they saw Rylan, and they froze. The bond was real. Not just political, not just for show. The infamous warrior of Zorthan and the human she had fought were walking side by side. No chains, no guards. The message was clear. Something had changed. A young Zorthan child ran up to Rylan, wide-eyed. He tugged at the human's coat. "Are you really the man who made our general fall?" Sailari reached for the boy, but Rylan knelt down first. "No," he said with a smile. "She didn't fall. She chose to stand beside me." The crowd watched in silence, and for the first time, they didn't see weakness. They saw unity. That night after returning to the palace, Sailari couldn't sleep. She stood on the balcony looking down at the glowing city. Her hands gripped the cold stone railing. Rylan walked up behind her but didn't say anything. He knew not to break the silence too early. Eventually she spoke. "I was trained to see humans as lesser, as messy, as soft." Her voice was soft, almost lost in the wind. "But you don't beg, you don't complain, you don't even hate me for trying to kill you." "I don't have the time for hate," Rylan replied. "Hate doesn't fix anything." She looked at him finally, not with anger, not with pride, but with something else. "Why didn't you finish me that day?" Rylan paused. "Because I saw something in your eyes. You didn't want to kill. You just didn't know any other way to survive." She turned away, gripping the stone tighter. "I don't know who I am when I'm not fighting." "Then maybe," Rylan said gently, "we figure that out together." Days passed, then weeks. They trained together now. She corrected his form with a quiet nod. He sparred with her but never held back. They began sharing meals, not as husband and wife, but as warriors who had started to understand each other. One evening, a servant ran into their chamber, breathless. "A fire, on the west wall. Civilians, trapped." Without hesitation, both Rylan and Sailari ran toward the danger. When they arrived, flames licked the walls of a collapsed building. Screams came from inside. The guards hesitated, waiting for orders. Rylan didn't. He pulled off his coat, wrapped it around his mouth, and ran in. Sailari stared for a heartbeat, shocked. Then she followed him. Together, they pulled out 3 civilians, then 5, then 7. Rylan coughed, black smoke on his lips. Sailari's arms were burned from shielding others, but they kept going until the last voice was silent. When it was over, the people looked at them with wide eyes, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as heroes. That night, back in their chamber, Rylan sat by the window, wrapping a bandage around his hand. Sailari stood nearby, quiet. "I've seen soldiers run from less fire," she said. "I've seen queens hide behind gold when their people burn," he replied. She knelt beside him and took the bandage gently from his hand. "You are not what I expected," she said softly. He smiled. "Neither are you." Their eyes met, and in that moment something unspoken passed between them. Not duty, not honor, but trust. Maybe even the beginning of something deeper. The Queen's jealous wrath. The Queen watched them through the eyes of her spies. Every shared meal, every whispered word, every moment of calm between the human and the warrior, it filled her with rage. She had ruled with fear for decades. Her empire was built on obedience. No one questioned her, no one disobeyed. But now, a single human had poisoned everything, not with weapons, not with war, but with kindness, with respect, with a bond that had started as punishment and was now becoming something far more dangerous. Worse still, the people were watching. They saw the general soften. They saw the human act with courage, and they began to ask questions. Could humans be more than enemies? What else has the Queen lied about? Why did Sailari change because of him? These whispers spread like wildfire across star systems. Riots were stopped by his name. Fear turned to hope. The Queen's perfect control was slipping. So, she did what she had always done when threatened. She prepared to destroy. Hidden deep beneath the palace was a secret chamber, locked behind layers of old codes and blood oaths. Very few knew it existed. Fewer knew what was inside. There, resting in frozen black metal, were the Variks, a forbidden group of warriors, not born, but made. Half machine, half living nightmare, silent, obedient, programmed to kill without mercy. The Queen stared at them behind a wall of ice. "My beautiful shadows," she whispered. "I kept you in the dark, for the daylight betrayed me." She walked past the control panel and pressed her hand against the ancient glyphs. "Wake," she said. The ice cracked. The machine stirred, and far above, in the palace towers, Ryland Kane's life was already being counted down. Meanwhile, Ryland stood at the center of a growing storm he couldn't see yet. He was in the outer plaza, showing young cadets how to counter basic grapples. His sleeves were rolled up, his smile calm. The cadets laughed and practiced with each other. Even Sailari, standing nearby, allowed herself a faint smile. This was not the world she had imagined when she first met him. She had seen humans as weak, dishonorable. But this man, who trained soldiers without shouting, who carried injured civilians out of fire, who offered peace in a place built on war, he was undoing everything she believed. And strangely, it no longer scared her. But she didn't know the Queen had sent spies that very morning. Silent drones watching them from the rooftops, listening, measuring, calculating weakness. By the time Ryland returned to his quarters, the trap was already in place. That night, as Ryland lay resting in his room, he heard something odd. A click. Then silence. Another click. Closer this time. He stood up, tense. The lights flickered. Shadows moved unnaturally across the walls. He stepped into the hall. Empty. Too empty. Then, without warning, the lights died completely. Darkness. Ryland reached for his knife, but something slammed him into the wall. Cold, metal fingers wrapped around his throat. His feet lifted off the ground. He couldn't breathe. Then he saw it. A Varix assassin, jet black armor, no eyes, no soul. Ryland twisted, slammed his knee into the machine's side, broke free, and ran. He didn't stop to think. The Queen had made her move. In another part of the palace, Sailari woke with a sharp jolt. Something was wrong. Her warrior instinct screamed. She grabbed her sword and rushed toward Ryland's quarters. She arrived just in time to see him crash through a wall, bleeding, a second Varix behind him. She leapt between them and blocked the killing strike. Sparks flew. Sailari shouted, "They're Varix, killers from the old wars." Ryland wiped blood from his lip. That explains the welcome. They stood back to back, surrounded by 3 more of the machines now. The Queen hadn't sent one assassin. She had sent a unit. Ryland spoke calmly. "You ever fought these things before?" "Once," Sailari said, breathing hard. "I was 12. We needed 10 warriors to kill one." Ryland nodded. "Well, you've got me now," she smiled, "despite everything." Then we fight. The battle lit the halls with fire and screams. Steel clashed with metal. Sparks flew like lightning. Ryland moved like water. Fast, reactive, smart. Sailari struck like thunder. Powerful, fierce, unrelenting. Together they were chaos made perfect. But the Varix were endless. As soon as one fell, another arrived. By the time the last machine exploded in a blast of blue flame, the 2 warriors were breathing heavily, backs against a broken pillar. Ryland's arm was bleeding. Sailari's side was scorched. But they were alive. She turned to him, eyes wide with something close to awe. "Why do you keep surviving?" He looked at her and said, "Because someone still needs to fix this galaxy." That night, word spread, faster than fire. The Queen had tried to kill the bonded pair. Everyone knew. The whispers weren't whispers anymore. They were roars. Across planets, across colonies, people began to chant the names of the two warriors, Rylan Kane, General Sailari. The Queen had tried to silence them, and now they were louder than ever. In the safety of an abandoned training chamber, Sailari wrapped a bandage around Rylan's arm. Her hands were shaking. "I was supposed to break you," she said softly. Rylan looked at her. "You didn't." She didn't meet his eyes. "No. You broke me. And I think I needed it." He smiled. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "You're the only one who doesn't see it yet. But you're the heart of something bigger now. Something that can't be stopped." She finished tying the bandage. "Then I'll stop running." And for the first time, she leaned in and rested her head on his shoulder. The rebellion rises. The stars above Zorthan Prime had never looked so still. As the Empire slept, believing its strength eternal, a fire was building in secret. A fire lit by truth, by honor, and by two warriors who had refused to kneel. Far below those stars, in the shadow of the ruined training halls, Rylan Kane and General Sailari stood quietly at the edge of the royal city, preparing to disappear. The Queen had declared them traitors. Varric's assassins still searched the streets. Their bond was now considered a threat to the throne. But neither of them planned to run forever. They had something more dangerous than weapons. They had hope. Their escape was made possible by a quiet friend, a royal engineer named Viel, whose child Rylan had saved weeks ago during the Great Fire. Without asking questions, Viel had guided them through ancient tunnels beneath the palace, tunnels so old even the Queen had forgotten them. "Where will you go?" Viel whispered as he handed them stolen supplies and a navigation tablet. "To the border moons," Rylan said. "Some still remember what peace felt like. Others are ready to fight for it." Viel looked at Sailari, uncertain. "And you trust her?" "I do," Rylan replied. "With my life." Viel hesitated, then nodded once. "Then may the stars guide you both, and may your story survive the lies." The moons of the outer system welcomed them not as fugitives, but as symbols. In a quiet spaceport on the mining world of Korath, dozens of beings waited for them. Some were former Zorthan soldiers. Others were refugees from colonies the Queen had stripped of resources. And a few were even humans, survivors who had slipped through the Queen's war nets. They had all heard the stories. The human who faced the Queen's warrior and won. The warrior who turned her back on the crown. The two who had fought the Varrics together and lived. Sailari stood before them in simple armor, no medals, no flags, no throne behind her. But when she spoke, her voice shook the walls. "I fought for the Queen for half my life. I crushed rebellions. I burned cities. I followed orders." Her eyes met theirs, full of regret. "Then I met a human who refused to break, and in doing, so he broke me free." Rylan stepped beside her. "We're not here to rule. We're not here to take revenge. We're here to build something better, and it starts with all of you." There was silence, then a cheer, then hundreds of voices, rising together, not in anger but in unity. Over the next few weeks the rebellion began to form. But this was not a rebellion of fire and rage. It was careful, strategic, and built with purpose. Rylan taught tactics he had learned from Earth's oldest wars. Sailari trained warriors with discipline and heart, refusing to let them become what she once was, tools of fear. They called themselves the Bound Flame, named for the strange and powerful bond between the human and the warrior. And under that banner, new recruits came every day. Entire squadrons defected. Pilots delivered stolen data. Scientists shared blueprints of forbidden Zorthan technology. Artists and storytellers began spreading messages across star networks. The Queen's control was breaking from within, and she knew it. From her throne, Queen Kira watched the reports in silence. Map after map showed defectors, civil unrest, new resistance outposts. but it was the footage that made her hands tremble. A grainy video, streamed across a dozen systems, showed Rylan and Sailari standing beside a newly freed colony, lifting the fallen Zorthan banner and replacing it with a white flag shaped like a flame. Then Rylan spoke. "To any who still serve the Queen, we do not hate you. We only ask you to open your eyes. We are not your enemies, we are your chance to be free." The Queen stood slowly, eyes burning with hate. "Then let them learn what freedom costs." She ordered Operation Black Rain, a full assault on every moon rumored to harbor rebels. No survivors, no mercy. She would silence their hope with fire. Back on the rebel moon of Tor Velis, Rylan and Sailari stood in their underground command center. Screens lit the room with movement. Ships arriving, troops training, engineers crafting new weapons. But a red alert flashed suddenly on the main console. "Zorthan fleet entering orbit," said the comm officer, voice shaking. "They're not warning, they're firing." A massive blast struck the moon's atmosphere shield. Buildings trembled. Panic spread. Rylan looked to Sailari. "This is it," she nodded. "We stand. We don't run." He grinned. "I knew you'd say that." She stepped forward, calm and fierce. "Activate ground defenses, launch counter-signal, send the fleet." Then she turned to Rylan. "If we fall, we won't," he said firmly. "Not today." And with that, they charged toward the surface, together. The first wave of Zorthan ships was met by rebel squadrons, fast, silent, trained under Rylan's eye. On the ground, Sailari led the counterattack, sword in hand, not as a general of the Queen, but as a leader of the free. The people didn't fight for power. They fought because they had seen what life could be, because they had watched a human and an alien stand side by side and change everything. As the battle raged, explosions lit the sky. Rylan stood atop the main tower, sending final commands to other moons. "This is not just one war," he said into the comms. "This is the spark that lights them all." And in that moment, across a dozen systems, rebels rose. Zorthan warships were sabotaged from the inside. Cities once ruled by fear opened their gates, and on 100 planets the Queen's name was no longer spoken in respect. It was spoken in warning. Back on Tor Velis, the battle ended with the fall of the last war drone. Sailari stood beside Rylan, both of them covered in dust and bruises. She turned to him, breathless. "You said you didn't come here to lead." He smiled. "And yet, here we are." She looked out over the crowd of cheering rebels. "No," she whispered. "Here, we rise." The crown falls. The stars above the royal planet of Zorthan Prime looked no different than they had for centuries. Still, endless, watching. But something had changed below them. For the first time in 1,000 years, the skies were not silent. A rebel fleet now hovered beyond the upper clouds, ships of every kind, shape, and species. Their hulls bore the mark of the bound flame, glowing white in the darkness like a promise whispered across time. Inside the lead command ship stood Rylan, Kane, dressed not in the polished armor of Earth's military, but in the simple dark plates gifted by the united rebel worlds. His eyes were steady. He had come a long way from being the chained prisoner on Arena Stone. At his side stood General Sailari, no longer in the Queen's colors. Her armor now shimmered with the symbols of unity, of rebellion, of rebirth. Her sword hung low at her, hip ready not to destroy but to defend something that finally mattered. Below them, the Queen's palace stood tall like a wound in the world, still gold, still perfect, and surrounded by fear. Rylan turned to Sailari. "You ready?" She gave him a faint smile. "I was born in that palace. Now I will help end its rule." The assault was not a surprise. The Queen had known this day would come. For weeks, her spies had warned of a final strike. She had watched her empire shrink with every moon lost, every city liberated. She had screamed until her voice broke, ordered strikes, purges, assassinations. But nothing stopped the tide. And now, it was here. Her throne room was lined with her, most loyal guards. War Machine stood by, powered up, red-eyed. She stood in the center, robed in black and gold, her crown shining, too bright, too heavy. She had no intention of surrendering. If they come through those doors, she whispered, they will leave in ashes. The palace gates didn't fall with fire. They fell with truth. A transmission echoed across the system, broadcast, from orbit. It was Sayalari's voice. To the people of Zorthan, to the soldiers still loyal. I am Sayalari, once the Queen's blade. I speak to you not with orders, but with memory. I served her. I believed her, and I was wrong. But now I stand beside the man I once called enemy, because he showed me there is another way. Then Ryland's voice joined hers. You've heard the lies, that humans are beasts, that peace is weakness, but you've also seen us bleed for you, fight beside you, save your families. The Queen says strength comes from fear. We say it comes from hope. The palace guards listened, and one by one, they began to lay down their weapons. By the time Ryland and Sayalari entered the throne room, the Queen stood alone. Her eyes were red with rage. You traitor, she hissed at Sayalari. I raised you, I made you. Sayalari stepped forward, sword in hand, but lowered. You made me into a weapon, but he taught me to be a person. Ryland looked directly at the Queen. This ends today. Surrender, no more blood. The Queen laughed, bitter and broken. You think this ends with peace? I'd rather burn the Empire to ash than give it to a human. And then she attacked. She was faster than expected, her blade glowing with dark power. She moved like a shadow, wild, precise, deadly. But Sayalari had fought with her before. She knew her moves. They clashed, sword against sword. Years of loyalty now turned into fury. Ryland didn't interfere. Not yet. This was a battle between the old world and the new, between a warrior and the Queen who had used her. Blades rang out. Sparks flew, statues fell. In the end, it was not speed or strength that decided the fight. It was clarity. Sayalari blocked the final blow, twisted and knocked the Queen's sword from her hand. It clattered across the marble floor. The Queen fell to her knees, breathing hard. Do it, she spat. Kill me. That's what traitors do. But Sayalari didn't move. She lowered her sword. No, she said softly. That's what you taught me to do. But I'm done being what you made me. She stepped aside and turned to the rebel guards now filling the room. Take her. Let the people judge. For the first time in her life, the Queen was dragged away. Powerless. The palace gates were opened. Citizens flooded in, not with fear but with celebration. Flags of the old empire were pulled down. New ones were raised, each bearing the flame that never died. Ryland and Sayalari walked side by side through the halls that had once controlled galaxies. Now those same halls rang with cheers, not orders. In the central square, Sayalari stood before thousands. She looked up, quiet at first. I once thought being strong meant never asking questions, never showing weakness, but I was wrong. Real strength is learning, growing, and standing beside those who show you a better way. She turned to Ryland. He showed me that. Ryland stepped forward, not as a conqueror, not as a hero, but as a man who had simply refused to break. He didn't speak long. Just enough. We are many species, but we share one truth. No throne is stronger than a heart that dares to change. That night, under the stars, the two of them stood on a balcony high above the city. Peace had come, but not the end of their journey. You ever think we'd get here? Sayalari asked. Ryland smiled. Not in the way we did. She looked at him with something soft in her eyes. You were supposed to be my punishment. And you were supposed to be my executioner, he said. She stepped closer. Instead, you became my beginning. And with that, she took his hand. This time not out of duty or tradition, but out of something far deeper, something real.